That one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Well, howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this one, we are going to continue our series on whitetail strategies. But first, a little Texas history. Did you know that in June of 1819, Texas actually tried to declare independence? Way ahead of the March 2nd, 1836 Declaration of Independence. So on June 23rd, 1819, a provisional Texas government headed by James Long declared independence from Spain. Because remember, Mexico was still a part of Spain, so it wasn't entirely the Mexican republic, or really dictatorship, by what it was by 1836. Long, a merchant from Natchez, was the leader of a filibustering expedition from that city organized in the wake of the controversial Adams Onis Treaty. By the middle of July, he had more than 300 men under his command and had made overtures for assistance to Jean Lafitte in Galveston. By the end of November, however, Spanish troops had succeeded in driving the American settlers out of Texas. The indefatigable Long withdrew to New Orleans, where he joined forces with José Félix Tres Palacios and reestablished his base at Point Bolivar. Long soon broke with Tres Palacios. He and his men captured La Bahia in October 1820, but surrendered 4 days later. Long was taken prisoner and sent to Mexico City, where he was shot and killed by a guard reportedly in the pay of his former ally, Tres Palacios. So there you have it. Let's see, 17 years prior to the official victory for independence by Texas, folks were already starting to kind of agitate up here to break free of the imperial bindings and imperial overreach in Texas. So as you can see, that strain of independence has been long in existence, over 200 years now. 206 years from the point of the Long independence. So, it's still there, and we still have the fight in us, I believe. So it should be and shall be again, in my opinion, that Texas will be its own country again. It'll be a republic again. Unfortunately, it'd be much better if the United States was still, as it was constituted originally, as a federal republic, where the states were still sovereign and were essentially the creators of the federal government. But now, states have basically been relegated to secondary or even tertiary departments, if you will, under the federal government. But, in the end, the states have the power, and I believe we'll end up taking it back. I don't know when that'll happen. Hopefully sooner rather than later, and hopefully it won't take a major crisis for us to get there. But, I believe that it will happen. That's a big reason why we talk about these historical moments in Texas history during these podcasts, because we want everyone to be interested again, to kind of maybe go on their own and research and see why Texas is the way it is and why she will be the greatest country in the world again going forward. All right, let's jump back into whitetail strategies. All right, guys, whitetail strategies. We're continuing this. We've been going through the book called, interestingly enough, amazingly, Whitetail Strategies, a no-nonsense approach to successful deer hunting. And on this one, we're going to talk about what is the deal behind rattling. You know, what are some rattling strategies, and why do they work? Maybe why they don't. I don't know if you guys do that a lot down at your place when you're deer hunting. It is fun to be able to do that and maybe call some bucks in, and then it's really fun to watch them fight. That's always an entertaining thing while sitting in the deer blind. So rattling strategies that work anywhere. Rattling or rattling, depending on how you want to pronounce it. The act of using a set of antlers to simulate a rack meshing skirmish between two bucks. Rattling has definitely captured the imagination of deer hunters across the country, and especially throughout the Northeast over the last decades. I'll bet hunters have tried this one deer hunting method more than any other single hunting strategy over the last several decades. I started my writing career by penning an article called Rattling Big Bucks of the Northeast in 1983. Wow, a long time ago. This one feature article literally launched my outdoor communications profession. The response to that rattling article was overwhelming. Everywhere I went, hunters asked me repeatedly, "Does rattling really work in the Northeast?" I found it hard to understand why they couldn't believe and embrace the fact that deer, both bucks and does, responded to the clashing of antlers all across North America, including the Northeast. After all, in the whitetails world, the sounds made by two bucks' antlers as they spar or fight are commonplace. The response to this noise is both basic and instinctive for bucks and does. It's Mother Nature's natural attraction. Rattling triggers an investigative response from deer, and it is just one more integral component of their breeding cycle. Before getting into the details about how to rattle, etch these thoughts in your mind. Rattling is the most forgiving hunting tactic. Even if you make a few mistakes, you'll still rattle in bucks. As long as you forget everything you've ever been taught about traditional deer hunting methods, that is, you will not be unsuccessful. You do not have to be quiet and sit motionless waiting for a deer to come by when you rattle. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Noise and movement are factors that help attract bucks to you. When you're rattling, you're not hunting bucks anymore. They're hunting you. Well, so this might be a good strategy if you have like a toddler or a young kid and it's like getting restless in your deer blind. Start rattling. It'll distract them. Let them do a little bit of it. But if they're making noise, yeah, maybe it won't be such a bad idea. Continuing. However, before I say anything else about rattling, I should qualify it with this. Rattling works. It really does. Not always, but often enough to make a difference in your buck hunting success ratio. It's not a cure-all magic buck hunting strategy. There will be times you'll just not believe how successful it is. There'll be other times you'll become frustrated with its seemingly ineffectiveness. All in all, it will aid you as a deer hunter, and it will thrill you beyond your wildest dreams each time you rattle in a buck. Nothing related to deer hunting is more satisfying or exhilarating than rattling in a white-tailed buck. This, in and of itself, makes rattling worthwhile even if it doesn't work every time you try it. Keep in mind, when you're rattling or calling, you're announcing to all interested bucks exactly where you are. As they respond to your rattling, they will focus all their senses, their ability to smell, see, and hear, on you. It doesn't take a buck long to pinpoint where the sounds are coming from. Because of this, you must take a few simple precautions when you rattle. If you do, you can have immediate success. The nature of the fight. You may be tempted to browse over the next few pages. You shouldn't. The reason I wrote about the behavioral and instinctive reasons why bucks fight is to arm you with important information other than basic deer hunting data about the subject. By understanding the natural instinctive behavioral traits of why bucks fight, you will be a much better rattler and deer caller. In order to understand why the sounds of meshing and grinding antlers attracts whitetails, hunters should fully understand the biological origins about the nature of fighting. Animals fight for one of two reasons: to establish their dominance, such as a spot in the pecking order within a specific social hierarchy, or to establish their territorial rights over a certain piece of ground. Although white-tailed deer are neither truly territorial or dominant, despite what you've read about these subjects, they do, to a degree, adhere to these behavioral traits. Deer are more hierarchical, which means they have no absolute fixed territories, than territorial. Some animals are purely territorial and defend a specific space or turf within a definite scent or visually marked area to the death. Still, other species exist within hierarchies in their terrain and must deal with both types of aggression. In my years of hunting, videotaping and observing whitetails, I've never found them to be territorial, to the legitimate definition of the word, especially mature bucks. Documented research has confirmed that, when necessary, mature bucks travel many miles outside their home ranges in so-called core areas during the primary rut in search of does and estrus. In several papers on the subject, researchers have confirmed that tagged or radio-colored bucks travel as much as 30 or more miles in search of hot does. They also confirm that it isn't uncommon for a buck to regularly travel 5 to 10 miles during the rutting period in search of receptive does. This means bucks who do this type of short or long distance traveling from their home range enter into the so-called territory of other so-called dominant bucks. If territory and dominance were actually ruling traits of the whitetail, many bucks would die during fights over dominance or by defending territory. This simply does not happen. Therefore, I strongly feel that these two words should be used carefully. The reason for this is to not get caught up in the web of promotional hype. Very few outdoor writers and some manufacturers create stories and product they think will market better by trying to make the hunting public believe that certain products and tactics will attract, quote, the dominant buck from within a herd, as if each herd has only one dominant animal who rules as a tyrant over all the other bucks. If you let yourself be tricked by this marketing hype, you could wind up using wrong tactics based on erroneous information. Webster's dictionary defines dominant as having the most control or influence, most overwhelming. Keep this definition in mind when you apply the word dominant, and you're safe. It does not say dominant over all others. In every herd of whitetail, there are several dominant bucks within that herd. There are many submissive bucks too. You'll understand the importance of what I'm saying further along in the chapter. It's also why I'm about to explain in detail the fight or flight principle below. Read it carefully, or you, dear listener, listen to it carefully. Think about what I said above and what I'm about to say below and evaluate it with common sense. You'll realize a lot of the information you've heard about rattling, dominance, territory, and aggressive hunting tactics is unadulterated horse poop. Fights regularly occur within a resident buck's home range and also when transient bucks enter the home ranges of other bucks. These fights are rarely more than pushing and shoving matches. They are not designed to cause injury or death. Instead, Mother Nature uses a variety of ritualized signals and postures as her most efficient way of settling disputes within the same species. Animals of the same kind could not be programmed to fight to death. If they were, it would not benefit the species as a whole and could cause its eventual extinction. If death occurs during a fight, it's usually caused from the unintentional locking of antlers or from an accidental puncture wound of a point on a buck's antlers. Not because a resident buck instinctively reacted to a transient buck with over-aggressive behavior and tried to establish dominance. Territorial behavior is found in carnivores like the big 5 meat-eaters of Africa, lions, hyenas, wild dogs, leopards, and cheetahs, as well as wolves of North America. Most other animals are pressured to fight not to protect territory or to establish dominance, but to protect their space, also referred to as their defense zone. In the whitetails world, most resident bucks simply ignore transient bucks as trespassing infractions, as most of the transient bucks are visibly inferior in antler and body size. In addition, this ignoring behavior is further enhanced when submissive bucks display a yielding conduct. A submissive animal display displays visible signals to a more aggressive animal that it does not want to be threatening. It will avoid eye contact, keep its head up high, or turn its rump toward the more aggressive animal. With these forms of body language, the submissive animal clearly makes itself non-threatening. When this occurs, dominant or aggressive animals instinctively end any potential fighting behavior, and the bucks go back to their normal non-aggressive conduct. Bucks establish their place in the hierarchy in the late spring and early summer. This pecking order clearly shows each buck where he stands socially and physically among the other males within his immediate herd, and, to some degree, bucks on the fringes of his home range. Therefore, there is no need for bucks to constantly fight to establish dominance during the rut. They already know their place within the male hierarchy. As the rut progresses and the more stronger, aggressive bucks become weakened from the constant stress of chasing and breeding doe, this position in the pecking order changes. The so-called dominant buck, physically weakened and mentally drained from the rigors of the breeding season, if a buck can be mentally drained, is often displaced by another buck with similar or equal antler size, but is more physically fit at the time. I once saw a 10-point buck who was clearly the most aggressive buck within the herd, just by his sheer antler and body size. An 8-point buck chased him away from a doe. My only deduction, based on seeing this same scenario unfold numerous times since, is that the bigger buck was run off by a somewhat smaller buck, generally equal in body size, for no other reason than the smaller buck being more physically fit. A classic example is when a young 20-year-old 6'1", 210-pound boxer beats the 29-year-old champ who's 6'4" and 230 pounds. Just because the champ is bigger and heavier and has more experience doesn't always guarantee him a victory. Physical strength alone could help the younger boxer to dethrone his larger and more visually threatening opponent. This is how body language helps to effectively diffuse actual aggressive physical confrontation between animals. Combat can be avoided through ambivalent posturing, which biologists refer to as displacement activity, and other forms of body language. For a species to continue to perpetuate and evolve successfully, Mother Nature installs this body language safety device when it comes to fighting. It prevents a lot of unnecessary injuries, death, and wasted energy, which is vital to the animal, especially during courtship. Along with body language, Mother Nature has also implanted some autonomic signals within the nervous system. Whenever an animal is aroused to the degree of physical confrontation of ritualized combat, it undergoes several immediate but basic psychological changes. We are all familiar with the fight or flight axiom. To be a more effective deer hunter, especially a rattler or caller, you should clearly understand how it works. When any mammal, including man, becomes aggressively stimulated, a full-fledged flight takes place from time to time. However, other than today's modern man who is so belligerent to his fellow man, in nature, serious fighting among wild animals occurs only as a last resort. Then, only when all other aggressive signaling and counter-signaling has failed to resolve the dispute. A classic example of this is when two bucks of equal body and antler size confront each other. Once they have decided a hostile confrontation is necessary, their instinctive reaction is to immediately size each other up. Instead of running headlong at each other, they use body posturing to warn off the other opponent. Like, hey, look me over good, do you really want to brawl with me? They use this size-me-up theory to try to avoid actual combat. Then psychological changes kick into gear. The animal wants to fight but receives other signals to flee. These contradictory signals are simply nature's way to check and balance all aggressive behavior. These are known as the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic signal simply prepares the animal's body for fierce fighting action. The parasympathetic signal has the responsibility of counteracting the former. Basically, while one signal says to a particular animal, "I'm ready to rumble," the other says, "Maybe I'd better take it easy and relax and assess my opponent further." Even though a buck may emerge victorious from an out-and-out fight, the victory could be anticlimactic, as he may also emerge with serious bodily injuries or a life-threatening drain of injury, making his victory bittersweet at best. In the end, aggression drives an animal forward while fear restrains it. Any battle that can be settled with limited physical contact and replaced with elaborate threat rituals and posturing tremendously benefits the species and helps to further jettison it forward on the evolutionary ladder. Therefore, if you want to include antler rattling in your deer hunting bag of tricks, it's important to understand why bucks respond to rattling. This information I'm sharing here will help make you a more intelligent and effective hunter. Remember, one of the rules for effective hunting is to know your quarry as well as you know yourself, maybe even better. If you follow this axiom, the more successful predator you will be. In the end, that's what man has evolved into, and that's what you are as a deer hunter, a predator. Since our genesis as a thinking, upright, walking, and speaking animal, we have evolved from the tree-dwelling, passive primate whose diet was strictly vegetarian to the ground-dwelling, savanna primate who adapted to scavenging and hunting into its lifestyle. These changes allow it to continue to successfully evolve as a predatory species. For eons, we continued along this hunting evolutionary path and eventually evolved from the solely predatory hunters of yesteryear to more of an opportunistic omnivorous species. Then we became farmers during the agricultural period of our evolution to finally the passive gatherer of today. Each time we enter a supermarket, we perform passive ritualistic gathering ceremonies. Therefore, the more you can know about your ancestral genetic pool as a predator, the more successful you'll be as a hunter. My first rattling experience. Antler rattling requires you to employ a few key factors for it to be a consistently successful hunting method. First, it necessitates that you believe that it works. It requires active participation in order for you to have any chance at all to create the entire illusion. It demands your confidence. When I began rattling, I wanted to research how rattling worked and then write about its effectiveness in an outdoor magazine. I packed my gear and headed to an area hunted in Childbald, New York, a small hamlet nestled between Tupper Lake and Cranberry Lake on Route 3 in the Adirondack Mountains. I started hunting in the Childbald area several years earlier when International Paper Company opened, for the first time in over 100 years, a large tract of its lumbering land. The first several years I hunted there, I saw many large Adirondack bucks shut by hunters. I thought surely this was the place to try rattling. My first experience was both comical and educational. I found a little knoll and began to rattle just as it became light. Not an hour after I began rattling, I heard the unmistakable crunch of leaves coming in my direction. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And there, to my surprise, was a big 6-foot, 6-inch Adirondack lumberjack-type man walking toward me while uttering a myriad of unpleasant profanities. When he got to within 5 yards of my nose, he stopped. In a very deep and threatening voice, which I can remember verbatim, he said, "What the hell are you doing, stupid?" "I'm rattling," I said in a meek and embarrassed voice. "You're what?" he snapped back. Remember, in 1975, hardly anyone outside Texas knew about rattling, never mind used it as a hunting method. "I'm rattling," I once again said to him. I sheepishly showed him the small 4-point set of antlers tightly clutched in my hand, hoping he would consider them sort of potential weapons to harm him if need be. "Well, I've got a bulletin for you, buddy. You hit those horns together again, and I'm going to stick them where they won't make any more noise." Now, do you remember the fight or flight response I talked about earlier? I had no such response. All my instincts told me to run. Unfortunately, I was sure if I stood up, this guy would see that I had urinated in my pants and would have beat me to death where I stood. So instead, I guaranteed him I would put the antlers away and he would not have to be bothered by the noise again. He grumbled and said something to the effect, "Smart move," and left. Interestingly, he walked off in a totally different direction from which he approached. I'm Italian, and therefore I'm pretty headstrong. I interpreted his departure to a new direction as a signal of total disgust and that he was leaving the area. I waited for what I thought was an ample and safe amount of time, and then mustered up the courage to start rattling again. As luck would have it, not 15 minutes after my second sequence, I heard 2 shots. Bang! Bang! Someone called out, "Hey, buddy!" Nah, it was his buddy. "Come here quick, you're not going to believe this." I must admit I hesitated about going over to him. I had serious thoughts about the possibility of his not returning alive. But the excitement in his voice sounded genuine, and so over the knoll I went. To my sheer and utter amazement, there, not 75 yards from where I was rattling, was a magnificent 8-point buck lying on the forest floor. Not 20 yards from the buck was the lumberjack yelling at the top of his lungs, "Buddy, you're not going to believe this. You're just not going to believe this. When you started that rattling stuff again, I decided to get up and come and pay you a visit. Just then, that buck broke out from the swamp and started to head right to you. So I shot him." While disappointment that he shot the buck I rattled in, the dead buck did convince me I was onto a hunting strategy that was hot. I didn't rattle in another buck over the next couple of days, but I learned a valuable lesson. A lesson that may have even been better, well, almost better, than shooting the buck. The lesson of having confidence that rattling works. Confidence. From that day forward, I believe that rattling works. Every time I didn't get a response to my rattling efforts, all I had to do was think about that buck lying on the ground, and I got a surge of new confidence about rattling. For the remainder of that deer season, my success was very limited. Even when I rattled in a buck, I convinced myself, as you will, that I really didn't rattle him in. I made excuses for his presence, like, the buck was coming towards me anyway, or someone spooked the buck to me. In other words, even when you first have success with rattling, you won't let yourself believe it worked. All these excuses will be subliminally generated from a lack of confidence in yourself and the strategies you chose to use. To compound this, you'll be your own worst enemy when it comes to rattling. I have seen it time and time again. Most hunters who give rattling a try eventually don't. The reason is simple. They're just too embarrassed to be caught in the woods, meshing and grinding antlers, rustling leaves, breaking branches, and grunting. I guess all these antics make them feel foolish. That's really too bad. If you can get over the embarrassment about rattling, the rest, such as having a buck respond, is easy. By the following deer season, I started rattling in bucks more consistently and believed I rattled them in. Once that happened, I was hooked. More important, now I was absolutely positive the tactic worked, and I behaved like it did. Each time I rattled, I expected something to happen. I became an active, confident, and believing participant. I knew I had to imitate all the sounds and sights caused by two fighting bucks to fool a buck into reacting. I had to stomp my feet to imitate the hooves of the fighting bucks, snap branches, rustle leaves, shake saplings, and make subtle vocalizations, all in an earnest effort to create the entire illusion. As I said in Chapter 4, confidence is the most important factor to successful buck hunting. You can intensify that to the 10th power when it comes to rattling and calling. All right, I think we're going to leave this chapter here. When we get to the next whitetail strategies, we'll continue and finish off this discussion about rattling and bucks. He gives a lot of information about the sounds, how often, what to use, synthetic versus real antlers, things of this nature. Just a lot of good tips in here. Size of antlers to use, things such as that. How many sequences, how long, and whatnot. So you'll want to, when you see that podcast come out, pull out a notepad so you can take some notes. And that's where all the tactics are going to come in. We talked strategy today. Now next Whitetail Strategies podcast will be all the tactics of rattling. So that'll be a fun one. Before I leave you guys today, just wanted to point out that we are very close to having our polos ready to go for you guys. Believe it or not, you can actually go to feedbandit.com right now and place a pre-order. The initial run will be kind of a limited run. See what kind of sizes you guys are, which ones you like, and things of that nature. So if you go on there and you take a look at what you want, be sure to go ahead and make a purchase and get that in place. So get it reserved, if you will, when we launch. Now, I will tell you, we're shooting very hard to launch in at least by the opening of dove season, which means that's when we would ship your pre-order to you. But by buying now, that means you are getting one on reserve. So, that'd be very, very beneficial to you. Let's just say that. So with that, go over there, check them out, feedbandit.com. And I really appreciate you guys listening to this edition of the Feed Bandit podcast. It's because of you that we keep doing it, and it's because of you that keeps us back in business. So with that, I will leave you on this one, and we'll see you on the next one. Support your local feed store. Thank you. Take care.
Well, I hope the bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Anna. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.